Millionaire CEO abandoned cheating wife for surrogate. Then he finds out she's a virgin and marries her after birthing quadruplets. The first time Dominic Russo saw Lyra Bennett, she was just a name on a surrogacy application. The second time, she was sitting across from him in his penthouse, her honey gold hair falling in waves around a face that seemed too young for the weight of what she was offering. You understand what I'm asking? Dominic's voice was measured and controlled. The same tone that had built Russo Enterprises into a tech empire worth billions. Lyra met his gaze without flinching. You want a child without complications. No co-parenting, no custody battles, just a clean arrangement. Her voice was soft but steady. I've read the contract thoroughly, Mr. Russo. He studied her, 26, nursing student, impeccable health records. Her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, flecked with gold that caught the late afternoon light streaming through his floor-to-ceiling windows. Why would someone like you become a surrogate? He asked bluntly. A shadow crossed her face. Medical school isn't cheap. My father is in hospice care, and insurance only covers so much. She straightened her shoulders. I'm not looking for pity, Mr. Russo. This is a business arrangement that benefits us both. Dominic nodded, impressed by her composure. 6 months ago, his world had imploded when he discovered his wife of 3 years, Vanessa, in their bed with his VP of operations. The divorce was still fresh, the betrayal still raw. But at 42, he wasn't willing to abandon his dream of fatherhood along with his marriage. The procedure would be next month, he said, sliding a folder across the glass table. Final contract. Have your lawyer review it. Lyra took it, her fingers brushing his momentarily. Something electric passed between them, so brief he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. I don't need more time, she said. I'll sign today. That night, alone in his penthouse, Dominic poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stared at Lyra's signature on the contract. He told himself this was logical, efficient, the perfect solution. What he didn't admit was how those amber eyes had stirred something in him he thought had died with Vanessa's betrayal. Welcome to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth, where we share tales of the heart that stay with you long after the last word is spoken. Before we get into Dominic Russo's story, I want to ask you something real. Have you ever felt like no matter how much you achieve or control, there's still an empty space inside that nothing seems to fill? What if the person who changes everything for you isn't someone you expected, but someone who's quietly carrying their own struggles and dreams? Lyra Bennett is more than just a surrogate. She's a woman who's faced hardship with courage, who's been caring for her sick father and chasing her own dreams while making an impossible choice to help create a new life. Her strength isn't loud. It's in every quiet sacrifice and brave step forward. I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell me where you're watching from. If you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss a single moment of stories that remind us how messy, beautiful, and real life can be. Now let's begin. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air of Dominic Russo's penthouse office, suspended between him and the woman he'd called his wife for 3 years. Vanessa stood before him, diamonds glittering at her throat, her posture defiant despite the mascara streaking her cheeks. Is this about the surrogacy again? Dominic asked, his voice eerily calm as he set down his tumbler of whiskey. Because we can find another. It's about Julian, she interrupted, chin lifting. Your VP of operations. We've been together for 8 months. The crystal tumbler shattered against the wall before Dominic even realized he'd thrown it. Have you ever discovered the person you loved isn't who they claimed to be? Dominic Russo had built Russo Enterprises from nothing into a $4.2 billion tech empire through calculation, precision, and an uncanny ability to predict human behavior. Yet he completely missed the betrayal happening under his own roof, in his own bed, with his most trusted executive. How long? His voice was ice now, the legendary control that had intimidated boardrooms across 3 continents sliding back into place. Does it matter? Vanessa's perfect red lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. Long enough to know he sees me as more than just a vessel for continuing the Russo bloodline. When the person you married has been living a lie, how can you trust anything was real? The divorce settlement cost Dominic $30 million and barely registered as a blip in his net worth. The public scandal cost him considerably more in stock value, but was forgotten by the next quarter's earnings report. What lingered was the hollow echo in his chest where trust had once lived. 6 months later, Dominic sat across from Dr. Patel, founder of Elite Surrogacy Services, in her discreet Midtown office. Mr. Russo, this is the third surrogate who's withdrawn after meeting you, Dr. Patel said, her expression carefully neutral. Perhaps if you could appear more personable during the interviews? Dominic's jaw tightened. I'm not auditioning for a role, doctor. I'm seeking a woman to carry my biological children. My personality shouldn't be relevant. Dr. Patel's sigh was barely perceptible. With all due respect, surrogates need to feel comfortable with the intended parents. Your approach has been described as intimidating. Intimidating, he repeated flatly. Cold. Clinical. One candidate said speaking with you felt like negotiating with a computer program. At 42, Dominic Russo had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. The pristine penthouse overlooking Central Park. The private jet. The vacation homes he never visited. The only thing he truly wanted, a family, children of his own, seemed increasingly out of reach. I'm running out of patience, Dr. Patel, he said, checking his watch. And options. There is one more possibility, she said, hesitating. Though it's unconventional. Dominic's dark eyes narrowed. I'm listening. A new applicant. She meets all the medical criteria, exceptional, actually. 26, perfect health, high IQ. But she has no prior surrogacy experience. Why would I consider someone inexperienced? Because she's determined enough not to be scared off by you, Dr. Patel said bluntly. Medical school debt and a father in hospice care. She needs the money badly enough to tolerate difficult circumstances. Would you accept help from someone whose motives you question, even if they offered exactly what you needed? Asterisk the file Dr. Patel slid across her desk contained a single photo, a young woman with honeygold hair and striking amber eyes. Lyra Bennett, nursing student. Her application noted she was working part-time to support herself through school while managing her father's care. Set up the meeting, Dominic decided. Tomorrow. The Russo Enterprises boardroom fell silent as Dominic swept in, precisely 10 minutes late for his own meeting. The wall of windows behind him framed Manhattan's skyline like a backdrop designed specifically to highlight his power. Gentlemen, ladies, his voice cut through the tension. I'll be taking a step back from day-to-day operations for the next year. The collective intake of breath was audible. Marcus Fletcher, his CFO, was the first to recover. Dominic, we're in the middle of the Asian expansion. The board won't. The board will do whatever I tell them to do. Dominic interrupted smoothly. I own 53% of this company. May we ask why? Elena Santos, his new VP of operations after Julian's abrupt resignation, leaned forward. Dominic's gaze swept the room, challenging anyone to question him further. I'm going to be a father. The announcement dropped like a bomb. Whispers erupted around the table. Everyone knew about the messy divorce, the accusations Vanessa had hurled through her publicist about Dominic's obsession with having children. Congratulations, Elena offered carefully. Will there be a new Mrs. Russo joining you? No. His tone closed that line of inquiry definitively. I've engaged a surrogate. The procedure is scheduled for next week. I'm preparing for multiple births. Multiple babies? Marcus sputtered, adjusting his glasses as if they were malfunctioning. The odds are favorable with multiple embryo transfers. I want heirs, not just an heir. Dominic's expression remained impassive. My private residence is being renovated to accommodate a nursery wing. I'll be working remotely when necessary. As the meeting dissolved into logistics and reassignments, Dominic gazed out at the city that had given him everything except what he truly wanted. A family that couldn't betray him, couldn't leave, couldn't decide he wasn't enough. Tomorrow, he would meet the woman who might finally make that possible. If you could create the perfect family on your own terms, would you? Or is the messiness of love worth the risk of heartbreak? Asterisk like this video if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, and subscribe to for more stories about finding love in unexpected places. Comment below, would you trust someone who needed your money as desperately as you needed their help? The answer might not be as simple as you think. The sun hadn't yet risen over Manhattan when Dominic Russo began his day. 5 a.m. workouts were non-negotiable. Control of the body meant control of the mind. As he completed his final set of pull-ups in his penthouse gym, the city below slowly awakened, unaware of the man who had already been productively shaping his empire for an hour. At 42, Dominic had the physique of a man 10 years younger, testament to the discipline that governed every aspect of his life. His morning routine never varied. Workout, protein shake, shower, suit selected from a precisely organized closet. No decisions wasted on trivialities. "Good morning, Mr. Russo," his house manager, Edward, greeted him as he emerged from his bedroom. "Your schedule has been updated. The board wants to discuss yesterday's announcement." Dominic nodded, accepting the coffee prepared exactly as he preferred. Black, no sugar, precisely 175 degrees. "Let them discuss. My decision is final." "And your meeting with the potential surrogate remains at 4 p.m.? "Yes. Have the legal team deliver the contract by 3. I want to review it once more." Edward, accustomed to his employer's exacting standards, simply nodded. 6 years in Dominic's employ had taught him that questions were rarely welcome, and small talk never was. Left alone with his coffee and the sunrise painting golden streaks across his minimalist living room, Dominic allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The space around him, $12 million of prime Manhattan real estate, felt hollow. The Italian furniture, curated art collection, and panoramic views had been selected by designers to project success, not to provide comfort. His phone vibrated with a text. "Raphael, need to talk. It's important." "Breakfast?" Dominic frowned. His younger brother rarely reached out, and when he did, it usually meant trouble. Their relationship had deteriorated from childhood closeness to adult formality, punctuated by occasional heated arguments about the company and their divergent values. "Canada. Dinner tomorrow. My place. 8 p.m. The response came immediately. "It can't wait." With a sigh of irritation, Dominic typed, Metro Diner. 7 a.m. "I have 30 minutes. The diner was a concession to Raphael's perpetual rebellion against the trappings of wealth. While Dominic could easily afford Michelin-starred breakfasts, his brother insisted on frequenting establishments where their father had taken them as children. Before Russo Enterprises existed, before billions of dollars separated them from ordinary lives. "You look terrible," was Dominic's greeting as Raphael slid into the booth across from him. It wasn't an exaggeration. His younger brother's usually bright eyes were shadowed, his designer clothes rumpled as if he'd slept in them. "Always the charmer," Raphael replied, ordering coffee from the waitress with a warm smile that transformed his haggard face. The Russo charm, their mother's genetic gift, had skipped Dominic entirely and landed double on his brother. "You have 28 minutes, Dominic said, checking his watch. "What's so urgent?" Raphael leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I need you to hire someone. We have HR departments for that. Not for the company. For your surrogate situation." Dominic's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "How do you know about that?" "Elena told me." "My VP of Operations reports to you now?" Dominic's voice turned dangerously quiet. Raphael rolled his eyes. "We had dinner last week. She mentioned you're taking time away from the office to become a father. Which, by the way, is the most emotionally stunted approach to parenthood I've ever heard. Your 28 minutes are rapidly decreasing." "Her name is Lyra Bennett," Raphael said, sliding a folder across the table. "She's 26, nursing student, perfect health. She needs money for her father's hospice care and her medical school tuition." Dominic stared at the folder without touching it. "You're suggesting I hire your friend as my surrogate." "Not my friend. My best friend's sister's roommate. I've met her twice. But she's exactly what you're looking for, intelligent, healthy, and desperate enough to tolerate you for 9 months. Your concern for my welfare is touching." "I'm not concerned about you," Raphael said bluntly. "I'm concerned about her. She needs the money, but she doesn't need to be treated like a walking incubator. If I recommend her to you, I need your word you'll treat her with respect." Dominic finally opened the folder. The photograph inside showed a young woman with striking amber eyes and honey-gold hair falling in waves around a face too earnest for New York City. She looked directly at the camera, neither smiling nor frowning, just present, aware, resolute. "This is the same woman Dr. Patel recommended," Dominic realized. Raphael nodded. "Because she's perfect on paper. But I know you, Dom. You'll approach this like a business transaction, and she'll be just another asset to acquire. That's exactly what this is, a business transaction. I need a surrogate. She needs money. She's a human being," Raphael countered, "with hopes and dreams and a father who's dying. If you hire her, you need to remember that." Dominic closed the folder. "I meet her today at 4. I'll form my own assessment. Raphael sighed, the fight leaving him. There's something else you should know. Something not in her file. What? She's never been with anyone. Romantically. Dominic's eyebrow arched. She's 26 and has spent the last decade caring for her father and putting herself through school. Dating wasn't a priority. Why are you telling me this? Because I know how intimidating you can be. And she's going to be carrying your children. Potentially 4 of them. Just don't be yourself for once. Try being human. The waitress brought Raphael's coffee and took their orders. Dominic, suddenly not hungry, requested only a refill. His brother's words had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Why do you even want children, Dom? Raphael asked after the waitress left. You work 18-hour days. You've never even dated anyone with kids. You've structured your entire life to avoid messy human connections. Not everyone views parenthood as an inconvenience to their social calendar, Dominic replied coolly. That's low, even for you. You asked? I answered. I want children because I want a legacy beyond buildings with my name on them. I want to pass on what we've built. What you've built, Raphael corrected. I'm just the charming face who handles the press. You're Executive Vice President of Global Communications. Your title is longer than mine. And worth about $4 billion less. Raphael stirred his coffee absently. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about your sudden desire for fatherhood after Vanessa left. Dominic's face hardened. Vanessa has nothing to do with this. Vanessa has everything to do with this. She cheated on you. And instead of dealing with that pain like a normal person, therapy, rebound relationships, maybe actually processing your emotions, you've decided to create human beings who are genetically obligated to love you. I'm not having this conversation. Dominic stood, dropping cash on the table. Thank you for the recommendation. I'll take it under advisement. Raphael caught his arm. Just promise me one thing. What? Remember that Lyra isn't a solution to your loneliness. She's a person with her own life and problems. Dominic pulled away. I have meetings. The sleek black Maybach glided through Manhattan traffic, its tinted windows shielding Dominic from the city's chaos. His driver, Michael, knew better than to attempt conversation during these morning commutes, the time Dominic used to prepare mentally for the day ahead. Today, however, his mind refused to focus on quarterly projections and market expansions. Instead, it circled back to Raphael's words. A solution to your loneliness. Was that what this was? Dominic had never considered himself lonely. Solitary, yes. Selective about his companions, certainly. But lonely implied a lack, a need unfulfilled. The Russo Enterprises headquarters rose 68 stories above Fifth Avenue, its glass and steel facade reflecting clouds and sky. Dominic had designed it himself, working with architects to ensure every line, every angle projected precision and power. As the elevator whisked him to the executive floor, employees nodded respectfully, maintaining the careful distance he preferred. His office suite occupied the northeast corner of the top floor, corner offices being the traditional symbol of corporate power. But unlike most executives who position their desks to face the door, dominantly confronting each visitor, Dominic's desk faced the windows. People didn't interest him, possibilities did. Mr. Russo, his executive assistant, Charlotte, greeted him as he entered. The board has called an emergency meeting at 10. Cancel it. Charlotte, unflappable after 5 years working for him, simply nodded. They won't be pleased. Their pleasure isn't my concern. Reschedule for next week. Yes, sir. Also, Mr. Fletcher needs your signature on the Tokyo acquisition, and legal sent up the surrogate contract for your review. Dominic paused. Have they made the changes I requested? Yes. Full confidentiality, comprehensive health provisions, and the multiple birth clause has been updated. Good. I'll review it before my 4 o'clock. Alone in his office, Dominic turned to the wall of windows. From 68 floors up, people became patterns, traffic transformed into flowing rivers of light. He preferred this perspective, removed, objective, seeing the whole rather than its messy components. His cell phone rang. Private line. Mother. Dominic. Elizabeth Russo's voice carried the crisp authority that had guided 2 sons to extraordinary success. Raphael tells me you're becoming a father. He closed his eyes briefly. Of course Raphael had called her. I'm exploring surrogacy options. Without consulting me? Without considering family candidates? Family candidates? Dominic repeated, genuinely confused. Your cousin Melissa's daughter would be perfect. She's already had 2 children, she's financially stable, and she understands discretion. Mother, I've already selected a surrogate. Who? What family? What background? Have you run proper checks? Dominic pinched the bridge of his nose. At 72, Elizabeth Russo remained the formidable force who had transformed her husband's modest electronics repair shop into the foundation of what would become Russo Enterprises. After his death when the boys were teenagers, she had guided the company's expansion with ruthless efficiency before finally retiring 10 years ago. Her name is Lyra Bennett. She comes highly recommended by Dr. Patel. Bennett, his mother repeated. Not familiar with that name. Old money or new? Neither. She's a nursing student. The silence that followed was weighted with disapproval. A stranger, then. Carrying the Russo heir. Heirs, potentially. Multiple embryo transfer. Another silence. You're attempting to create instant heirs to compensate for your failed marriage. Thank you for your psychological assessment, Mother. Is there anything else? Don't be flippant, Dominic. I'm concerned. This isn't like buying a company. Children require emotional investment. I'm aware of what children require. Are you? Your father and I raised you and Raphael with specific values, with an understanding of your place in the world. This, surrogate, what values will she impart during pregnancy? What genetic predispositions are you introducing to our bloodline? Dominic's patience thinned. I've thoroughly vetted her medical history. The egg donor was selected for optimal genetic compatibility. Everything is being handled professionally. Professional doesn't mean personal, Dominic. Children aren't acquisitions. The echo of Raphael's earlier accusation made Dominic's jaw tighten. I appreciate your concern, Mother, but my decision is final. I'll bring her to Sunday dinner once the contracts are signed. He ended the call before she could respond, something he'd never have dared do in his youth. Age and billions had their privileges. The contract awaited him on his desk. 48 pages of legal protection ensuring the surrogate would have no claim on his children, no right to make medical decisions, no control over anything beyond the basic maintenance of her own health during pregnancy. As he reviewed the document, a strange discomfort settled in his chest. The language was clinical, reducing the extraordinary act of creating life to a series of transactions and obligations. Asterisk the carrier agrees. The intended parent shall provide. Upon successful delivery of the child, run, all parental rights shall transfer immediately. Asterisk for the first time, Dominic allowed himself to visualize the reality behind these sterile terms. A woman, Lyra, would nurture his children inside her body for 9 months. She would feel their first movements, hear their heartbeats, carry the physical burden of their growth. And then she would hand them over, disappearing from their lives as if she'd never existed. The thought should have reassured him. It was exactly what he wanted. Children without complications, heirs without divided loyalty. Instead, he found himself staring at her photograph again, wondering what had led this young woman with serious amber eyes to offer her body to create life for a stranger. Money asterisk, the cynical part of his mind supplied. But something about her steady gaze suggested there might be more. At precisely 3:55 p.m., Charlotte's voice came through the intercom. MS. Bennett is here for your 4 o'clock. Dominic straightened his tie, a rare gesture of nervousness he immediately recognized and suppressed. Send her in. Have you ever felt alone, even when surrounded by success? Like and share this video if you've ever achieved everything you thought you wanted, only to wonder if you've been chasing the wrong dreams all along. Subscribe for more stories about finding meaning beyond material success. Comment below. Would you change your approach to love and family if you could start over again? The woman who walked into Dominic's office moved with quiet confidence that belied her circumstances. Lyra Bennett wore a simple navy dress that appeared carefully selected to be professional yet modest. Her honey gold hair was pulled back in a neat bun, emphasizing the striking amber of her eyes that assessed Dominic with surprising directness as she crossed his vast office. Mr. Russo, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting with me. Her handshake was firm, her palm cool against his. Dominic gestured to the chair across from his desk, studying her as she sat. In person, she looked even younger than her 26 years, with a freshness about her that seemed out of place in a steel and glass domain. Miss Bennett, he replied, remaining standing. I understand my brother recommended you. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Raphael mentioned me? We've only met twice. He seems to believe we'd be compatible for this arrangement. Lyra straightened slightly. I assure you, Mr. Russo, my connection to your brother has nothing to do with my application. I submitted my paperwork through proper channels with Dr. Patel's clinic. Dominic nodded, finally taking his seat. Tell me about yourself. What would you like to know? My medical history is in the file. Why surrogacy? He asked bluntly. It's an extreme choice for a young woman with no children of her own. Lyra's hands folded neatly in her lap, neither fidgeting nor gripping, just resting with deliberate calm. I believe you already know about my father's hospice care. What the file doesn't mention is that I've been his primary caregiver since I was 16, when his Parkinson's was diagnosed. 10 years, Dominic observed. Yes, my mother left when I was 14, decided family life wasn't for her. Something flickered in Lyra's eyes, quickly suppressed. I finished high school while managing his early symptoms, then community college while his condition worsened, and now nursing school, with plans for medical school after. Neurology, specifically. A small smile touched her lips. I want to help families like ours. But dreams require funding. Dominic studied her. Most people who sat across from him either postured with false confidence or wilted under his scrutiny. Lyra did neither. She simply existed in the space, authentic and present. The compensation for surrogacy would cover your father's care, he asked. In my medical school applications, the clinic mentioned you're hoping for multiple births. Yes, I've approved transfer of up to 4 embryos. If this prospect alarmed her, she didn't show it. I've researched multiple pregnancies extensively. My health indicators suggest I'd carry successfully to at least 36 weeks, even with quadruplets. You've done your homework. I don't enter into agreements lightly, Mr. Russo. Her amber eyes held his, especially ones involving creating human life. Something shifted in the air between them, recognition, perhaps, of unexpected common ground. Dominic found himself leaning forward slightly. Neither do I, Miss Bennett. Would you like some water? Dominic asked, observing the slight tension in her shoulders as they moved to the seating area by the windows. This small courtesy, one he rarely extended to anyone, surprised even him. Yes, thank you. Lyra accepted the glass, taking a deliberate sip before setting it down. I should be direct, Mr. Russo. I know about your divorce. Dominic stiffened. That's hardly relevant. I disagree. This arrangement will connect us for at least 9 months, potentially for the rest of our lives if there are medical questions about the children's biological history. I should understand what I'm walking into. What exactly do you think you're walking into? His voice cooled several degrees. Lyra didn't flinch. A man determined to create heirs on his own terms after being betrayed. A situation where control is paramount to you, yet you're forced to rely on someone else's body to achieve your goal. She held his gaze steadily. That's a vulnerable position for someone like you. For a moment, Dominic could only stare at her, caught between irritation and grudging respect. You're very direct. Time has taught me its value. My father may have only months left. Every moment I spend in this office is one I can't spend with him. Her voice remained even, but emotion flickered behind her composed expression. If we're going to do this, we need clarity and honesty. Very well, Dominic said, recalibrating. Yes, my ex-wife betrayed me with a trusted colleague. Yes, I want children on my own terms. And yes, I require a surrogate who understands this is a business arrangement, not an emotional entanglement. Yet creating life is inherently emotional, Lyra countered. Denying that won't make it less true. A strange silence fell between them, filled with unspoken challenge. Dominic found himself drawn to her intelligence, her quiet strength. Most people in her position would be deferential, eager to please. Her willingness to challenge him was refreshing. Tell me about your father, he said suddenly. Surprise flickered across her face before she composed herself. He was a literature professor at NYU before his diagnosis. Brilliant, kind, loved by his students. Her voice softened. He taught me that stories are how we make sense of life's chaos. Even now, when his hands shake too badly to hold a book, I read to him every night. And your mother? Left when the initial symptoms appeared. Remarried in California. Sends birthday cards sometimes. Lyra's tone was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. It taught me early that some people aren't built for difficulty. And you are. Her smile was slight, but genuine. I haven't broken yet. Something unexpected stirred in Dominic. Respect, certainly, but also a strange protective impulse he immediately questioned. This woman wasn't seeking protection. She was offering a business exchange. The contract specifies complete medical compliance, he said, returning to safer ground. Regular appointments, proper nutrition, no alcohol or caffeine. I understand. I've been preparing my body for 6 months, optimal nutrition, supplements, exercise regimen. She straightened slightly. I take this responsibility seriously, Mr. Russo. These will be your children, but for 9 months, their well-being depends entirely on my choices. And after birth, no contact. A shadow passed behind her eyes, so quickly he almost missed it. As specified in the contract, I understand my role ends at delivery. And you're comfortable with that? Comfort isn't relevant. I've made my decision. She met his gaze with quiet determination. Now the question is whether you've made yours. 3 days later, Lyra sat in Dominic's penthouse, pen hovering over the final page of the contract. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the 48 pages that would bind them together for the next year. You've reviewed everything with your lawyer? Dominic asked, standing by the window, hands in his pockets. Yes. She'd actually stayed up all night with her roommate's boyfriend, a second-year law student, the best she could afford. Going through every clause. And you're satisfied with the terms? Lyra finally signed, her signature flowing across the designated line. The terms are fair. The compensation is life-changing. Dominic moved to sit across from her, taking the contract and adding his own signature. The first payment will be transferred today. The procedure is scheduled for next Friday. So soon. The fertility clinic has been monitoring my selected egg donor. The timing is optimal. He closed the folder containing their agreement. Do you have questions about the medical process? No. Dr. Patel explained everything. Lyra hesitated, then asked, May I ask a personal question? Dominic's expression remained neutral. You may ask. These children, you want them badly enough to go through this complicated process, to invest millions, to restructure your life. But in all our discussions, you've never mentioned what kind of father you want to be. The question hung in the air between them, unexpected and penetrating. For a moment, Dominic seemed genuinely taken aback. I intend to provide everything they need, he finally said. That's what you'll give them, Lyra said gently. Not who you'll be to them. Their eyes met across the table, hers questioning, his guarded. The connection that sparked between them was neither romantic nor purely professional, but something uncharted, complicated by the intimate nature of their arrangement. I'll be different from my own father, Dominic said finally, the words seeming to surprise even him. Present. Involved. Not just a name on a trust fund. Lyra nodded, something softening in her expression. Thank you for telling me that. As she gathered her purse to leave, Dominic impulsively asked, Would you like to see the nursery plans? A genuine smile transformed her face, bringing warmth to her amber eyes. Yes, I would. For the next hour, they stood side by side reviewing architect's drawings for the wing being added to Dominic's penthouse for connected nurseries with a central caregiver station, a medical monitoring room, and a peaceful sitting area overlooking the park. It's beautiful, Lyra said softly. They'll be very fortunate children. Dominic found himself watching her profile as she studied the plans, struck by the genuine care in her expression. This woman would nurture his children within her body, giving them life before passing them into his waiting arms. The intimacy of this reality settled over him like a weight both heavy and precious. Friday then, he said as he walked her to the elevator. Dr. Patel's office at 10. Lyra nodded, stepping into the elevator. Just before the doors closed, their eyes met once more. Two strangers about to embark on the most intimate journey possible, both pretending it was simply business. Has life ever taken you down an unexpected path that changed everything? Like this video if you've ever made a decision that completely altered your life's direction. Subscribe for more stories about courage and connection in unexpected places. Comment below. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken for a better future? Sometimes the most life-changing journeys begin with a single brave step. The morning of the procedure dawned bright and clear, sunlight glinting off Manhattan's glass towers as Dominic's car pulled up to Elite Fertility Center. The clinic occupied the top floor of a discreet medical building on the Upper East Side, its clientele exclusively high-net-worth individuals seeking privacy and exceptional care. Dominic arrived 15 minutes early, as was his habit. The waiting area, designed to resemble a luxury hotel lobby rather than a medical facility, was empty except for a nervous couple in the corner. He declined coffee from the attendant and instead checked his emails, responding to 3 urgent matters from the Tokyo office while he waited. At precisely 9:58, the elevator doors opened, and Lyra stepped out. She wore a simple blue dress with a light cardigan, her honey gold hair loose around her shoulders. Their eyes met across the room, and she offered a small smile as she approached. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the momentous nature of the day. "Good morning," Dominic replied, rising. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough." Her hands clutched a small canvas bag. "They asked me to bring comfortable clothes for after." Before he could respond, a nurse appeared. "Ms. Bennett, we're ready for your pre-procedure examination." Lyra nodded, then turned to Dominic. "I'll see you afterward." "I'll be here," he assured her, surprised by his own desire to offer more comfort than these simple words. As Lyra followed the nurse, Dominic returned to his seat, finding it suddenly impossible to focus on emails or market reports. Today, if all went as planned, his children would be conceived not in passion or even affection, but in a sterile medical room with scientific precision. The thought should have satisfied his need for control. Instead, he found himself oddly unsettled. 20 minutes passed before Dr. Patel herself emerged from the corridor, her expression professionally neutral as she approached. "Mr. Russo, could we speak privately?" Something in her tone sent a ripple of concern through him. "Is something wrong with Miss Bennett?" "Not wrong, no. But there's a matter we should discuss before proceeding." In Dr. Patel's office, a warm space with medical degrees displayed alongside photographs of smiling babies. Dominic remained standing, tension building in his shoulders. "What's happened?" he asked directly. Dr. Patel folded her hands on her desk. "During Ms. Bennett's examination, we discovered something unexpected." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Ms. Bennett appears to be intact." Dominic's brow furrowed. "Intact? She's a virgin, Mr. Russo." Dr. Patel's voice remained clinical, but her eyes held a question. "This is highly unusual for a surrogate. Typically, we work with women who have carried at least one successful pregnancy." The information landed like a physical weight. Dominic stood perfectly still, processing this revelation. Lyra, dedicated student, caretaker, woman of quiet strength, had never been intimate with anyone, and her first experience of creating life would be for him, a virtual stranger. "Does this affect the procedure?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Not medically, no. The embryo transfer is minimally invasive, but ethically." Dr. Patel hesitated. "I wanted to ensure you were aware of this circumstance. It adds a certain emotional complexity to your arrangement." "Did she know you would tell me this?" "She authorized sharing any relevant medical information with you as the intended parent." Dr. Patel studied him. "She didn't volunteer this information herself?" "No." The realization sparked an unexpected feeling. Not anger, but a strange protectiveness. Why hadn't Lyra mentioned this? More importantly, why did it matter to him? "I'd like to speak with her," he said finally. "Of course. She's in examination room 3. Lyra sat on the edge of the examination table, still in her dress, but with a medical gown laid across her lap. When Dominic entered, her chin lifted slightly, a defensive gesture he was beginning to recognize. "You spoke with Dr. Patel," she said. "Not a question." "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "It wasn't relevant to our arrangement." Her amber eyes met his directly. "My medical records confirmed I'm healthy and capable of carrying a pregnancy. My personal history doesn't affect that." Dominic moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. "You're giving your first experience of physical intimacy to my children." "Physical intimacy and pregnancy aren't the same thing," she countered. "My body, my choice. The contract doesn't stipulate sexual experience. That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Mr. Russo?" A flash of fire in her eyes now. "That I should have disclosed every personal detail of my life? That my lack of romantic history somehow makes me less qualified? No." He found himself at an unusual loss for words. "It's that this is significant. For most women, their first pregnancy follows a relationship, love, commitment." Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Not everyone's path looks the same. I made my choices based on my circumstances." "Which were?" She sighed, the defensive posture melting into something more vulnerable. I told you I've been caring for my father since I was 16. What that means practically is that I've spent the last decade scheduling medications, attending medical appointments, working part-time jobs, and studying whenever I could squeeze it in. Her fingers twisted the fabric of the gown in her lap. Dating wasn't just low priority, it was no priority. The few times I tried, men either couldn't understand my responsibilities or wanted me to choose between my father and them. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It was never a difficult choice. Dominic studied her, this young woman who had shouldered adult burdens while still a child herself. And now? Why choose this as your first experience of creating life? Because it's purposeful, she said simply. It's not happening because I was careless or desperate for connection. It's a choice I'm making to help create something beautiful while also securing my father's care and my future. Her eyes held his. There's dignity in that choice, Mr. Russo. I don't expect you to understand it, but I do expect you to respect it. The honesty in her voice disarmed him. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, an uncharacteristic gesture for a man who kept everyone at arm's length. If you want to reconsider, he began. Lyra's fingers tightened around his. I don't. I've made my decision. Her voice softened. But thank you for asking. Something passed between them in that moment, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of the strange intimacy they were about to enter. Dominic found himself unable to pull his hand away, struck by the warmth of her touch and the quiet certainty in her eyes. Mr. Russo? Dr. Patel's voice broke the moment as she entered with a nurse. We're ready to proceed if you both are. Lyra nodded, releasing his hand. I'm ready. The procedure itself was brief, clinical. Dominic waited outside as instructed, pacing the private lounge with uncharacteristic restlessness. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, her expression was cautiously optimistic. The transfer went perfectly, she reported. All 4 embryos were viable and properly placed. Ms. Bennett is resting comfortably. For embryos, Dominic repeated. The possibility of quadruplets suddenly felt more real, more consequential. Yes, as you requested. Dr. Patel studied him. The chance of all 4 implanting is approximately 15%. More commonly, we might see 1 or 2 viable pregnancies from this transfer. When will we know? Blood test in 2 weeks. But sometimes symptoms appear earlier. Dominic nodded, processing this information with the same analytical focus he applied to business decisions. Yet underneath ran a current of something unfamiliar, concern not just for the outcome, but for Lyra herself. Can I see her? Dr. Patel seemed surprised by the request. Of course. She'll be ready to leave in about 30 minutes. I've prescribed rest for the remainder of the day. When Dominic entered the recovery room, Lyra was sitting up, changed into soft cotton pants and a loose sweater. The medical setting made her look younger, more vulnerable. The doctor says everything went well, he said, stopping at the foot of her bed. Yes. Her smile was tired, but genuine. For potential Russos, safely delivered. I've arranged for my driver to take you home, and I'd like to come with you to make sure you're settled. Surprise flickered across her face. That's not necessary. Nevertheless, his tone brooked no argument. As the nurse helped Lyra into a wheelchair, standard protocol, though she insisted she could walk, Dominic found himself reaching for her bag, carrying her few belongings as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This protective instinct was foreign to him, at odds with the careful distance he maintained in all relationships. In the car, Lyra leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed. Dominic watched her profile, struck by the magnitude of what she had just done. Within her body now resided the potential beginning of his family, his legacy, his future, the children he had wanted for so long. Thank you, he said quietly. Her eyes opened, meeting his. This is just the beginning, she murmured. The hard part comes next. In that moment, something shifted between them, the sterile business arrangement taking on dimensions neither had anticipated. As the car moved through Manhattan traffic toward her apartment, Dominic realized with unexpected clarity that nothing about this journey would unfold according to his carefully structured plans. Have you ever discovered that someone you thought you understood was far more complex than you imagined? Like this video if you've ever been surprised by hidden depths in another person. Subscribe for more stories about connections that transcend our expectations. Comment below. Have you ever made a life-changing decision that others couldn't understand? Sometimes the bravest choices are the ones only we can fully comprehend. 2 weeks after the procedure, Lyra sat in her tiny bathroom staring at the positive pregnancy test, emotions swirling through her. Joy, fear, uncertainty, and beneath it all, a strange exhilaration. The 2 pink lines had appeared almost immediately, darker and more definitive than she'd expected for such an early test. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. The past 14 days had passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Dominic had checked in daily with brief, formal texts asking about her well-being. Each message had been professional, controlled, yet the very consistency of his concern revealed something beyond mere business interest. She dialed his number, heart pounding. Lyra. He answered on the first ring, her name a question. It's positive, she said simply. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken weight. Then, I'm on my way. 40 minutes later, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, Dominic stood there holding a small gift bag and a paper sack emitting delicious aromas. You didn't have to bring anything, she said, stepping back to let him in. I wanted to. His eyes scanned her face, searching for signs of distress or illness. How are you feeling? Still processing. Lyra gestured to the pregnancy test on her coffee table. Blood test is tomorrow, but this seemed pretty definitive. Dominic set down the food and handed her the small gift bag. This is for you. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a tiny crescent moon. For new beginnings, he explained, looking almost embarrassed. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes. It's beautiful. They ate the gourmet breakfast he'd brought, sitting at her small kitchen table. The normalcy of sharing a meal contrasted with the extraordinary circumstance binding them together. Dr. Patel wants to do an early ultrasound, Lyra said, breaking a comfortable silence. Since we transferred multiple embryos. Dominic nodded. When? Next week. She said it might be too early to detect heartbeats, but we should be able to see how many embryos implanted. The word "we" hung between them, a subtle acknowledgement of their strange partnership. Dominic's eyes met hers across the table. I'd like to attend, if you're comfortable with that. Of course, Lyra said. They're your babies. They're growing inside you, he replied quietly. That gives you certain prerogatives. The simple recognition of her role, not just as vessel but as an essential participant in this creation, warmed something in Lyra's chest. She smiled, surprised by how much his acknowledgement meant to her. The ultrasound room was dimly lit, monitors casting a blue glow over Lyra's nervous face as she lay on the examination table. Dominic stood beside her, his usual commanding presence subdued in this medical space. This gel will feel cold, the technician warned before applying it to Lyra's still flat abdomen. Dominic, without thinking, reached for Lyra's hand. She glanced at him in surprise but didn't pull away. His fingers wrapped around hers as the ultrasound wand pressed against her skin. The technician moved the wand methodically, studying the screen with professional focus. She murmured, adjusting settings. Is something wrong? Dominic asked sharply. Not wrong, no. She smiled, turning the monitor toward them. Just a bit crowded in there. I'm counting 4 distinct gestational sacs. 4, Lyra whispered. Quadruplets, the technician confirmed. All appear to be properly implanted. It's early days, but everything looks textbook so far. Dominic's hand tightened around Lyra's, his eyes fixed on the screen where 4 tiny circles marked the beginnings of his children. For heirs. For Russos. The reality of it struck him with unexpected force. All 4? He repeated, voice uncharacteristically rough. That's unusual, isn't it? A 15% chance, the technician agreed. You beat the odds. When Lyra finally looked at Dominic, she found his expression transformed, the controlled businessman replaced by a man facing the overwhelming reality of impending fatherhood multiplied by 4. Vulnerability flickered across his features before he masked it, but Lyra had seen it, a glimpse of the man behind the power. The weeks that followed established a new pattern in their lives. Weekly appointments became their ritual, each ultrasound revealing more detail, tiny fluttering heartbeats, miniature limbs forming, for distinct beings developing in perfect synchronicity. Dr. Patel added extra monitoring due to the high-risk nature of the pregnancy. Quadruplets require specialized care, she explained during their 8th-week appointment. MS. Bennett will need reduced activity by the 2nd trimester, possibly bed rest by the 3rd. Whatever is necessary, Dominic said immediately. Cost is no object. Afterward, walking to his car, Lyra felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Dominic caught her elbow, steadying her. When did you last eat? He asked, concern sharpening his voice. Breakfast, she admitted. I've been nauseous. Without discussion, he guided her to a nearby cafe, ordering soup and crackers. They sat by the window, the autumn sunlight creating a halo around Lyra's golden hair. Dominic found himself studying her, the gentle curve of her neck, the way she absently touched her still flat stomach, the quiet dignity with which she carried his children. How is your father? He asked as she finished her soup. Surprise flickered across her face. He's stable. The hospice care you've arranged is extraordinary. The private nurse has made such a difference. Good. Dominic hesitated, then added, I'd like to meet him. Lyra's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. You would. He's your family. And you're. He stopped, uncertain how to define what she was becoming to him. You're carrying my children. Our lives are connected now. Yes, she said softly. They are. The first time Dominic visited Lyra's father was a Tuesday evening. Thomas Bennett resided in a sunny private room at Hudson River Hospice, surrounded by books and photographs. Despite his trembling hands and slurred speech, his mind remained sharp, his amber eyes, so like his daughter's, missing nothing. So you're the billionaire, were his first words to Dominic. The one who's made my daughter a human incubator. Dad, Lyra protested. But Dominic merely nodded, respecting the directness. Yes, sir. Though I prefer to think of it as a partnership. A partnership. Thomas studied him. Unequal power dynamics make poor partnerships, Mr. Russo. The best partnerships leverage complementary strengths, Dominic replied. Your daughter possesses qualities I never will. Thomas's eyebrow rose. Such as compassion, grace under pressure, the ability to nurture. Dominic met the older man's gaze steadily. Qualities my children will need. Something in Thomas's expression shifted. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. Tell me what kind of world you plan for these children to inherit. For the next hour, Lyra watched in amazement as her father and Dominic discussed everything from educational philosophy to environmental ethics. The businessman's usual terseness gave way to thoughtful engagement. When Thomas tired, Dominic rose to leave, shaking his trembling hand with genuine respect. In the hallway outside, Lyra touched Dominic's arm. Thank you for that. He doesn't get many visitors who can challenge him intellectually. He's remarkable, Dominic said quietly. I see where you get your strength. The drive back to her apartment passed in comfortable silence. At her door, Dominic hesitated. Would you like to come in? Lyra asked. I could make tea. Inside her small but cozy apartment, Dominic seemed out of place, his tailored suit incongruous among her second-hand furniture and overflowing bookshelves. Yet he moved with surprising ease, helping her prepare the tea, noticing when she needed to sit down. As they settled on her couch, Lyra found herself asking, Why did you really want to meet my father? Dominic considered the question, steam from his teacup rising between them. I wanted to understand where you came from. Who shaped you? And did you find your answers? Some. His eyes met hers. He loves you very much. Yes. Emotion thickened her voice. He does. Tell me about your mother, Dominic said suddenly. Lyra's expression closed slightly. Not much to tell. She left when Dad's symptoms first appeared. Decided she hadn't signed up for sickness. Like my wife, Dominic said quietly. When difficulty comes, some people leave. The simple statement held volumes of pain. Lyra set down her tea, turning toward him. What happened? Really? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I found Vanessa in our bed with Julian, my VP of operations. My closest friend since college. His voice remained even, but tension lined his jaw. They've been meeting in our home for months, planning their future together once she secured a generous divorce settlement. I'm sorry, Lyra said softly. The betrayal wasn't just personal. Julian had access to company information, used it to position himself for a competitor. Dominic's eyes darkened with remembered pain. I trusted them both completely. Without thinking, Lyra reached for his hand. Not everyone leaves when things get hard. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. You didn't. No, she agreed. I didn't. Something shifted between them in that moment, acknowledgement of connection beyond their contract, beyond the children growing within her. When Dominic's free hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her face, Lyra's breath caught. This isn't in our agreement, she whispered. No, he agreed, his voice low. It isn't. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, questioning rather than demanding. Lyra responded hesitantly at first, then with growing certainty. His hand cradled her face as if she were precious, breakable. When they finally separated, both seemed stunned by what had happened. "Lyra," Dominic began, her name soft on his lips. She placed her fingers against his mouth. "Don't analyze this." "Not yet." He nodded, drawing her closer until her head rested against his shoulder. They sat like that as twilight deepened outside her windows, his hand occasionally stroking her hair, hers resting over the place where their children grew. 1 week later, everything changed. Lyra sat on her couch, Dominic beside her, reviewing the latest ultrasound images. For distinct profiles now visible, for tiny beings with fingers and toes. "They'll need names soon," she said, tracing one small head with her fingertip. "I've been considering family names," Dominic replied. "My grandfather was Alexander. My grandmother, Sophia. Beautiful names." Lyra smiled, then hesitated. "Dominic, I need to ask you something." "Of course. These past weeks, between us." She gathered her courage. "What is this becoming?" His expression grew guarded. "What do you mean?" "The visits, the dinners, the kiss." Her cheeks flushed. "Is this because of the babies, or because of me?" "Does it matter?" he asked carefully. "Yes." Lyra's voice strengthened. "It matters completely. I need to know if your interest in me exists only because I'm carrying your children." Something closed in Dominic's expression. "You're suggesting I'm manipulating you? Creating false intimacy to ensure your cooperation?" "No. Or perhaps you believe I can't separate my feelings for my children from feelings for their surrogate?" His voice cooled several degrees. "That's not what I meant." Frustration colored Lyra's tone. "I'm trying to understand what's happening between us before I get any more emotionally involved." Dominic stood, distance replacing the warmth of moments before. "Our arrangement is clear in the contract. Perhaps we've allowed boundaries to blur inappropriately." "Inappropriately," Lyra echoed, hurt flashing across her face. "I apologize if I've given you the impression that our relationship extends beyond our agreement." His voice had returned to the cool, professional tone of their first meeting. "It would be unfair to both of us to pretend otherwise." "I see." Lyra's hands folded protectively over her stomach. "Then I'll see you at the next appointment, Mr. Russo." The formality struck him like a physical blow, but pride kept him moving toward the door. "Of course. My assistant will confirm the details." As he reached for the doorknob, Lyra called after him. "Dominic, wait." But he was already gone, the echo of Vanessa's betrayal making him deaf to the plea in Lyra's voice. Have you ever found yourself building walls against the very connection you secretly want? Like this video if you've ever pushed someone away because you were afraid of being hurt again. Subscribe for more stories that explore the complicated nature of trust and vulnerability. Comment below. When is protecting yourself from pain actually preventing your happiness? For a week, they didn't speak beyond terse text messages confirming her prenatal appointments. Dominic threw himself into work, staying at the office until midnight, trying to forget the hurt in Lyra's eyes. He told himself this distance was appropriate, necessary, even. Their boundaries had blurred dangerously, threatening the clean, contractual nature of their arrangement. Yet each night, alone in his penthouse, he found himself reviewing the ultrasound images for tiny profiles already showing distinct features. His children, growing inside a woman he'd pushed away out of fear. At precisely 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, his phone rang. The screen showed Lyra's name. A call at this hour could only mean trouble. "Dominic." Her voice was tight with pain. "Something's wrong. I'm bleeding." Fear gripped him, cold and immediate. "How much? Have you called an ambulance?" "Not much bleeding, but sharp pain on my right side." She broke off with a gasp that turned his blood to ice. "It really hurts. I'm coming. Right now. Don't move." He was already pulling on clothes, ordering his driver through the phone speaker. "Stay on the line with me." The 15 minutes it took to reach her apartment were the longest of his life. He found her curled on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face, a small but terrifying smear of blood on her pale blue pajama pants. "I can't lose them," she whispered as he gathered her into his arms. "Dominic, I can't." "You won't," he promised, carrying her to the elevator. "We won't." The private hospital on Park Avenue had been alerted by Dominic's assistant during his frantic drive. A medical team waited at the emergency entrance, whisking Lyra immediately to an examination room. Dominic followed, his usual commanding presence reduced to that of any terrified, expectant father. "Sir, you'll need to wait outside," a nurse instructed firmly. "No." His voice brooked no argument. "I stay with her." Lyra's hand reached for his, clinging with surprising strength. "Please let him stay." The medical team exchanged glances but acquiesced. An obstetrician specialized in high-risk pregnancies arrived within minutes, her efficient movements belying the seriousness of the situation. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Dr. Winters. Can you describe the pain?" "Sharp, like a knife." "Right side." Lyra's face contorted as another wave hit her. "It started about an hour ago, got worse quickly." "Any nausea? Dizziness?" "Both." Dr. Winters nodded to the ultrasound technician. "Let's take a look." The moments waiting for the machine to power up, for the cold gel to be applied to Lyra's stomach, for the wand to find its target, they stretched into eternity. Dominic found himself holding his breath, his hand still captured in Lyra's desperate grip. "There we go," Dr. Winters murmured, studying the screen. Heartbeat 1 strong. 2 also strong. 3 good. 4 perfect. Relief flooded Dominic so intensely his knees nearly buckled. "They're okay?" "The babies look stable," the doctor confirmed. "But I'm concerned about this area here." She pointed to a dark spot on the screen. "Partial placental abruption, the placenta has begun to separate from the uterine wall. Not severe yet, but concerning in a quadruplet pregnancy." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked, fear evident in her voice. "It means hospital admission and complete bed rest while we monitor you closely." Dr. Winters' expression was serious. "With quadruplets, we're already in high-risk territory. This complication increases that risk significantly." "Could she lose the babies?" Dominic asked directly. "If the separation worsens, yes. But caught early like this, managed properly with complete rest, the prognosis is good." She looked between them. "The next 48 hours are critical. After that, we'll reassess week by week." As nurses prepared Lyra for admission, drawing blood and attaching monitors, Dominic stepped into the hallway to make calls to his office, canceling meetings indefinitely, to Lyra's school, arranging for her medical leave, to her father's hospice, ensuring they understood the situation. When he returned, Lyra was being wheeled toward the elevator. "You don't have to stay," she said, exhaustion evident in her voice. "I can call my friend Mia." "I'm staying," he said firmly. No arguments. In the private room, the best the hospital offered, nurses efficiently connected Lyra to monitors that tracked each baby's heartbeat, creating a symphony of rapid, steady pulsing that filled the space. Once they were alone, an uncomfortable silence fell between them, the beeping monitors the only sound. "Thank you," Lyra finally said, her voice small. "For coming so quickly." Dominic moved his chair closer to her bed. "I should never have left like that. The things I said." "You were protecting yourself." Her eyes met his, understanding despite her pain. "I get it. Trust doesn't come easily to you anymore." "That's no excuse." His hand found hers again, this time with gentleness rather than panic. "When you called tonight, when I thought we might lose them." He stopped, emotion threatening to overwhelm his carefully constructed control. "I know," she whispered. "Me too. Not just them." The words came with difficulty. "You, Lyra. I was terrified of losing you." Her eyes widened, searching his face for truth. "Dominic, let me finish. Please." He took a deep breath. "I've spent my life calculating risks, protecting myself from loss. When Vanessa betrayed me, it confirmed what I'd always suspected, that connections are liabilities, that people inevitably disappoint you." His thumb traced circles on her palm, his eyes fixed on their joined hands. "Then you came into my life. This arrangement that was supposed to be purely transactional. But you challenged me. You saw through my defenses. You cared about the kind of father I would be, not just what I could provide. You're going to be a wonderful father," Lyra said softly. "Because of you." Dominic finally met her gaze. "You asked if my interest existed only because you're carrying my children. The truth is, they connected us, but what I feel for you has nothing to do with our contract." "What do you feel?" she asked, vulnerability plain in her amber eyes. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Lyra Bennett." The admission cost him everything, his pride, his protective walls, his certainty. "And it terrifies me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't have to say that. Being here, your support, it's already more than enough." "I'm not saying it out of obligation." He reached up to brush away her tears. I'm saying it because tonight made me realize that some risks are worth taking. That pushing you away didn't protect me. It just made me miserable. Lyra's smile trembled. I've been falling for you too. But I was afraid it was one-sided, that you were just being kind because of the babies. Nothing about me is just kind, he said wryly. Ask anyone who works for me. Her laugh turned into a wince as pain flared again. Immediately, Dominic pressed the call button, concern replacing everything else. Easy, he murmured, stroking her hair as a nurse hurried in. One step at a time. The next 2 weeks transformed their relationship in ways neither had anticipated. Dominic converted the hospital room into his remote office, taking calls while Lyra slept, reviewing contracts while monitoring her comfort. The nurses soon grew accustomed to the sight of the billionaire CEO in his shirt sleeves, tie discarded, feet propped on Lyra's bed as they worked in companionable silence. You need to go home and sleep properly, Lyra insisted on the third night, watching him rub his neck. I sleep fine here, he countered, nodding toward the recliner the hospital had provided at his insistence. Dominic, you're 6'2". That chair is torture for you. His smile was tired but genuine. I've endured worse for less important reasons. When Dr. Winters finally cleared Lyra for discharge after 16 days, the conditions were stringent. Complete bed rest at home, monitoring equipment installed, nursing care, and weekly checkups. I can arrange all that at my penthouse, Dominic said immediately. The nursery wing is nearly complete. The medical monitoring room could be adapted for Lyra. No, Lyra interjected. I need my own space. My apartment is a 4th-floor walk-up with no elevator and barely enough room for your furniture, let alone medical equipment. Dominic's tone was gentle but firm. My place has 24-hour security, medical facilities, and enough space that you won't feel crowded by my presence. Your presence isn't the issue, she protested. Then what is? Lyra sighed, frustrated by her limitations. I don't want to be completely dependent on you. It changes the dynamic between us. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're worried about power imbalance. That you'll feel obligated. Yes. Dominic considered this, then offered a solution. What if I set up the guest wing as your completely private space? Your furniture, your things. A separate entrance if you wanted. You'd have autonomy, but with proper medical support and no stairs to navigate. Dr. Winters, who had been listening quietly, intervened. Ms. Bennett, medically speaking, his offer makes sense. Quadruplet pregnancies often require bed rest for months. You'll need significant support. After further discussion and a virtual tour of the space, Lyra reluctantly agreed. 3 days later, she found herself installed in what had once been Dominic's guest wing, now transformed into a comfortable apartment within his penthouse. Her books lined custom shelves, her quilt draped the hospital-grade bed, her father's photographs adorned the walls. You thought of everything, she said softly as Dominic showed her the call system that would summon either him or the nurse with a touch. I tried. He hesitated, then added, I want you to feel at home here, Lyra. Not like a guest, and certainly not like a patient. And what am I, exactly? She asked, the question gentler than the last time she'd posed it. Dominic sat carefully on the edge of her bed, taking her hand. You're the woman I'm falling in love with, who happens to be carrying my children. Everything else is just details we'll figure out together. The next weeks established a new normal. Dominic worked from home, taking meetings in his office but checking on Lyra regularly. They ate dinner together every evening, sometimes joined by Raphael, whose initial skepticism about their relationship had softened into cautious approval. Dominic read to her from classics she'd never had time to enjoy, discussed business problems that benefited from her insightful perspective, and most evenings, simply held her as they watched the sun set over the park. Her head on his shoulder, his hand protective over the growing swell where their 4 children thrived. This isn't how I imagined this arrangement would go, Lyra admitted one evening as they reviewed the latest ultrasound images for distinct profiles, now clearly recognizable as tiny humans. No, Dominic agreed, his arm tightening around her. It's infinitely better. Have you ever faced a crisis that forced you to confront your true feelings? Like this video if you've experienced how life's challenges can reveal what, and who, truly matters. Subscribe for more stories about finding courage to be vulnerable again after being hurt. Comment below, what obstacle did you overcome to find love? Sometimes what appears to be our greatest challenge becomes the gateway to our greatest blessing. After 8 weeks of bed rest, Lyra's 20th week checkup brought the news they'd been cautiously hoping for. Dr. Winters studied the ultrasound with careful scrutiny, then smiled. The placental abruption has completely healed, she announced. All 4 babies are developing perfectly on schedule. Does that mean? Lyra began, hardly daring to hope. You can resume light activity, the doctor confirmed. Short walks, gentle movement. Nothing strenuous, and you'll still need plenty of rest, but you don't need to be confined to bed anymore. The relief on Lyra's face was luminous. For nearly 2 months, her world had been limited to her bedroom and adjoining sitting area in Dominic's penthouse. Though he'd made it as comfortable as possible, filling it with books, installing a small garden on her private balcony, the confinement had tested her independent spirit. What about? Dominic hesitated, uncharacteristically tentative. Other activities? Dr. Winter's eyes twinkled with understanding. Intimacy is permitted, with appropriate care and positioning. The babies are well protected. Just listen to Lyra's body and stop if there's any discomfort. That evening, Dominic prepared dinner himself, pasta with a sauce that had taken him 3 attempts to perfect over the past weeks of cooking lessons. He set the dining table with candles and flowers, creating an atmosphere of celebration. To freedom, Lyra toasted with her sparkling water, her amber eyes reflecting the candlelight. Limited freedom, Dominic corrected with a smile. Dr. Winters was very clear about moderation. After 2 months in bed, even walking to the kitchen feels like an adventure. They ate together, discussing names for the babies, now confirmed as 2 boys and 2 girls. The easy conversation flowed between them, punctuated by comfortable silences and shared glances that held increasing warmth. After dinner, Dominic guided Lyra to the living room where he'd created a nest of pillows and blankets before the fireplace. Outside, snow fell softly against the darkened windows, Manhattan transformed into a glittering wonderland beneath them. "Dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand. "There's no music," she said, even as she placed her palm in his. He tapped his phone, and soft jazz filled the room. Lyra stepped into his arms, her now prominent belly creating a space between them as they swayed gently. His hand rested at the small of her back, supporting her, while hers curled against his chest. "I never thought I'd have this," she murmured, looking up at him. "What? This feeling? Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Dominic's hand moved to cradle her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You are. We are." When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that made her heart ache. His lips moved against hers with gentle exploration, deepening only when she pressed closer, her hands sliding into his hair. "Lyra," he breathed against her mouth. "Are you sure? We can wait." She smiled, taking his hand and leading him toward the bedroom. "I've been waiting my whole life for you. I don't want to wait anymore." In the soft light of his bedroom, Dominic undressed her with reverent care, his breath catching at the side of her body transformed by their children. His hands traced the curve of her belly, the fullness of her breasts, his eyes dark with desire and wonder. "You're beautiful," he whispered, pressing kisses along her collarbone, down to the swell of her breasts. Lyra trembled beneath him, her inexperience evident in her hesitant touches, but her desire was unmistakable. She helped him remove his clothes, her eyes widening as she took in his body. "I don't know what to do," she admitted softly. "We'll learn together," he promised. True to his word, Dominic took his time, exploring her body with gentle hands and mouth, discovering what made her gasp and arch beneath him. When he finally settled beside her, his movements were exquisitely careful, mindful of her comfort and the precious lives she carried. Their joining was slow, tender, a physical expression of feelings that had grown between them during months of shared hopes and fears. When Lyra cried out his name, clutching at his shoulders, Dominic felt something break open inside him, a tenderness so acute it was almost pain. Afterward, he held her close, his hand splayed protectively over her belly where a tiny foot or hand occasionally pressed against his palm. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I think I have since that first day in your office." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her mouth. "Marry me." Lyra stilled in his arms. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "Not because of the babies, not because of tonight, but because I want to wake up with you every morning for the rest of my life." She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest, moonlight silvering her golden hair. "Dominic, are you certain? People will talk. Let them. They'll say I trapped you, that I planned this from the beginning. Worry creased her brow. That I got pregnant on purpose to secure a billionaire husband. Dominic sat up beside her, taking her hands in his. Do you really care what people who don't know us think? I care about you. About your reputation, your family. My mother survived my divorce from a socialite who cheated with my VP. She'll manage. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Raphael already adores you. The board will adjust. And the public? Lyra pressed. The media? We'll have a field day, yes. Dominic's smile was wry. Russo marries surrogate carrying his quadruplets will sell a lot of tabloids. But does that matter compared to what we're building together? Tears spilled down her cheeks. No, it doesn't. He brushed them away gently. Is that a yes? She kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Yes, she breathed against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. The media reaction was exactly as predicted. The announcement of their engagement exploded across business news and gossip columns alike. Speculation ran rampant about Lyra's background, about the timing, about Dominic's mental state following his divorce. Vanessa called, furious and incredulous, demanding to know if he'd lost his mind. I've found it, actually, he told her before hanging up. His mother's reaction was more measured. Elizabeth Russo arrived at the penthouse unannounced, silver hair perfectly coiffed, evaluating Lyra with the shrewd assessment that had intimidated business rivals for decades. You're carrying quadruplets, she stated, eyeing Lyra's prominent belly. Yes, Mrs. Russo. 22 weeks now. And you've agreed to marry my son. I have. Elizabeth's piercing gaze softened slightly. May I? She asked, gesturing to Lyra's stomach. When Lyra nodded, the older woman placed a careful hand on her belly, her composure breaking momentarily as a baby kicked against her palm. 4 grandchildren at once, she murmured. Well, Dominic never did anything by half measures. By the time she left 2 hours later, Elizabeth had extracted promises of weekly family dinners and named 3 acceptable venues for what she called a proper Russo wedding. Dominic, however, had other ideas. 3 weeks, he told Lyra that evening. Before you get any larger and while your father is still strong enough to attend. 3 weeks? That's impossible, not for someone with my resources. He kissed her forehead. Small, private, perfect. Do you trust me? With everything, she answered simply. They married on Dominic's yacht, anchored in a secluded cove off the coast of Long Island. Lyra wore a simple ivory dress that flowed over her growing belly, a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Her father, temporarily released from hospice, was wheeled to her side to give her away, his trembling hand steady only when it held hers. Only 20 guests attended. Raphael, who stood as best man, Elizabeth Russo, elegant in navy silk, Lyra's friend Mia as maid of honor, and a handful of trusted friends and colleagues. The ceremony took place at sunset, the horizon painted in gold and rose as they exchanged vows. I promise to love your strength and support your dreams, Dominic said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. To be a partner in all things, to never take for granted the gift you've given me, not just our children, but your heart. Lyra's voice trembled slightly as she responded. I promise to stand beside you in all seasons, to believe in you when you forget to believe in yourself, to build a home with you not made of walls but of love and trust and second chances. As they sealed their vows with a kiss, her father's wavering voice rose in the blessing he'd prepared. May you always remember that the greatest fortunes in life aren't kept in banks, but in the moments you choose each other, again and again. Later, at the intimate reception, Raphael raised his glass in a toast. To my brother, who thought he needed an heir but found a family instead. And to Lyra, the only person I've ever met who could match his stubbornness with her own. Laughter rippled through the gathering as Dominic kissed his bride again, his hand protective over the swell where their 4 children kicked and tumbled, already making their presence known in the world they would soon enter. As night fell and stars appeared above the gentle waves, Thomas Bennett beckoned Dominic to his side. Take care of her, he said simply. She's given everything to everyone else for too long. I will, Dominic promised. For the rest of my life. Has your heart ever been transformed by someone who showed you a different way to love? Like this video if you've experienced how the right person can heal old wounds. Subscribe for more stories about finding unexpected joy after disappointment. Comment below. Have you ever found love in the most unlikely circumstances? Sometimes our greatest blessings arrive disguised as challenges we never anticipated. Their honeymoon was unconventional by any standard. A month in a private villa on the Greek island of Santorini, modified for a woman 6 months pregnant with quadruplets. Medical staff occupied the guest house. Monitoring equipment filled one bedroom, and Dominic had an emergency helicopter on standby. Yet despite these clinical necessities, the whitewashed villa perched on the cliffs above the azure Mediterranean became their private paradise. "Are you comfortable?" Dominic asked for perhaps the 10th time that morning as he adjusted pillows around Lyra on their sun-drenched terrace. She laughed, capturing his hand. "I'm growing 4 humans inside me. Comfort is relative. But yes, this is perfect." The morning sun gilded her skin, transforming her honey-gold hair into a halo. Pregnancy had given her a luminous quality that Dominic found himself marveling at daily. Her body, now round with their children, moved with a deliberate grace that spoke of both strength and vulnerability. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, catching his intense gaze. "How beautiful you are," he answered simply. "How fortunate I am." Each day followed a gentle rhythm dictated by Lyra's needs. Mornings spent reading on the terrace, afternoons floating in the infinity pool where weightlessness offered blessed relief from her growing burden. Evenings brought intimate dinners prepared by their private chef, followed by stargazing and quiet conversations about the future. "I never took a real vacation before," Lyra confessed one evening as they watched the legendary Santorini sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "Dad and I once drove to the Jersey Shore for a weekend when I was 12. That was our grand adventure." Dominic's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "We'll travel the world when you're ready. Show our children everything." Even though traveling with 4 babies sounds like a logistical nightmare, her eyes sparkled with amusement. "I built a global corporation from nothing. 4 babies is just a different kind of challenge." His confidence made her laugh, the sound he'd come to treasure above all others. As her pregnancy advanced, their activities grew more limited, but the intimacy between them deepened. Dominic read to her from books she'd always wanted to explore, learned to massage her swollen feet, and spent hours simply talking, filling in the gaps of their hastened courtship. At night, they slept with his body curved protectively around hers, his hand resting on the ever-moving swell of her stomach. The babies were active, especially after sunset, 8 tiny feet and hands pushing, stretching, reminding their parents of the miracle unfolding. "They already have distinct patterns," Lyra observed, guiding his hand to the upper right quadrant of her belly. "This one, I think it's a boy, always kicks right after his sister here pushes against him. They're already squabbling." Dominic smiled against her shoulder. "The Russo competitive spirit emerges early." "Heaven help us," she murmured, but her voice was filled with love. Back in New York, the nursery wing awaited their return. A marvel of design and functionality that had evolved significantly from Dominic's original clinical concept. What had begun as 4 identical rooms with a central monitoring station had transformed into a warm, cohesive space that balanced practicality with comfort. The walls, once planned for stark white, now featured hand-painted murals of enchanted forests and starry skies. Custom-built cribs of sustainable maple wood stood ready, each with subtle differences in the carved details to give each child their unique space. The monitoring system remained, but now discreetly integrated into furnishings that prioritized warmth over efficiency. "It's not what I originally designed," Dominic admitted as he showed Lyra the final touches after their return from Greece. "It's better," she said, trailing her fingers over the rocking chair big enough for her to hold 2 babies at once. "It's a home, not a hospital." As Lyra entered her final weeks of pregnancy, they settled into a new routine. Dominic worked remotely, never more than a room away. Lyra's father visited weekly, his health stabilized by the excellent care his son-in-law provided, his joy at seeing his daughter so happy giving him renewed strength. Together, they prepared. Folding impossibly small clothes, organizing supplies and meticulous systems designed for maximum efficiency, attending specialized classes for multiple birth parents. For if everything multiplied the usual new parent anxiety, but also the anticipation. "I never thought I'd have this," Dominic confessed one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her enormous belly. "Not just the children, but this, belonging." Lyra turned her face to his, understanding in her eyes. "We've both been alone in different ways. Me with my responsibilities, you with your wealth." "Not anymore," he murmured, kissing her softly. At 34 weeks, considered full term for quadruplets, Lyra was scheduled for a carefully planned C-section. The city's finest maternal-fetal specialists assembled at New York Presbyterian, where an entire surgical wing had been secured for the birth. The morning of the delivery dawned clear and bright. Dominic held Lyra's hand as they drove to the hospital, both tense with anticipation and fear. "For babies," she whispered, her face pale but determined. "We're about to become parents to 4 human beings." "We're ready," Dominic assured her, hoping his voice conveyed more confidence than he felt. The surgical prep proceeded with practiced efficiency until a nurse's sudden frown at the monitor disrupted the calm. "Baby C's heart rate is dropping," she announced, triggering an immediate response from the medical team. "We need to move now," the lead obstetrician ordered. "Prep for emergency procedure." Everything accelerated. Dominic, already gowned for the surgery, clutched Lyra's hand as the anesthesiologist administered the spinal block. Fear gripped him as he watched the monitors, for heartbeats displayed in pulsing waves, 3 strong, 1 faltering. "Dominic," Lyra's voice cut through his panic, her eyes locked on his. "Stay with me. They'll be fine. We'll be fine." Even now, facing her greatest physical challenge, she was comforting him. The realization humbled him completely. The surgery began with controlled urgency. Dominic remained at Lyra's head, stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances as the doctors worked with swift precision behind the surgical drape. "First baby coming," the doctor announced. "It's a boy." A thin cry pierced the tension, followed by the nurse's confirmation. "Baby A, male, 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Good color, strong lungs." Relief washed over Dominic as their first son was briefly shown to them before being whisked to the waiting neonatal team. "Baby B is here, a girl. 3 pounds, 14 ounces. Her cry was softer but determined, already displaying a personality distinct from her brother. The atmosphere tensed again as they reached baby C, the one with the dropping heart rate. Seconds stretched like hours until finally, another girl, 3 pounds, 10 ounces. "She needs some assistance." Dominic's heart constricted as he glimpsed his tiny daughter, her skin bluish, before she was rushed to the waiting specialists. "Is she?" he began. "Give them a moment," the anesthesiologist advised gently. The longest 30 seconds of Dominic's life passed before a small, indignant cry joined the symphony of medical sounds. "She's breathing on her own," a nurse called. Oxygen levels rising. Before he could fully process this relief, the doctor announced, "And here's baby D, boy number 2, 4 pounds even." The final Russo announced his arrival with the strongest cry of all, his tiny fists already clenched in apparent determination. As the surgical team completed their work on Lyra, Dominic moved between his wife and the 4 incubators where their children received their first examinations. Overwhelm doesn't begin to describe the emotion that flooded him. Love multiplied beyond comprehension, fear transformed into fierce protectiveness, and gratitude so profound it brought unexpected tears to his eyes. 1 week later, Lyra sat in a custom rocking chair in their penthouse, holding their smallest daughter against her chest while Dominic cradled both boys. Their largest daughter slept peacefully in the bassinet beside them. "Alexander, Benjamin, Sophia, and Grace," Lyra murmured, looking at each perfect face. "The Russo quadruplets. The beginning of our legacy," Dominic agreed, his voice soft with wonder. Thomas Bennett, seated nearby, smiled at the scene before him. "Not just a legacy of wealth or achievement," he observed, "but of love, the most valuable inheritance of all." As twilight fell over Manhattan, bathing the penthouse in golden light, Dominic looked at his family. The wife he'd found in the most unexpected circumstances, the 4 miraculous children they'd created together, even his father-in-law whose wisdom he'd come to treasure. In this moment of perfect contentment, the billionaire who had once measured success in dollars and deals understood finally that true wealth couldn't be quantified or protected by contracts. True wealth was right here, in the beating hearts that had healed his own. Have you ever received a gift far greater than what you thought you were seeking? Like this video if you've discovered that sometimes life's detours lead to our most precious destinations. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected journeys to love and family. Comment below, what unexpected blessing changed the course of your life forever? Life rarely follows the paths we carefully plan. Sometimes it shatters our expectations entirely, only to rebuild something far more beautiful from the fragments. For Dominic and Lyra Russo, this truth became the foundation of their unexpected journey together. One evening, 6 months after the quadruplets' birth, Dominic stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching as Lyra sang softly to Sophia, the smallest of their 4 miracles. In the adjacent cribs, Alexander, Benjamin, and Grace slept peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in the synchronized rhythm that still amazed him daily. She finally settled, Lyra whispered as she placed their daughter beside her sister. They all fought sleep tonight. Already showing their Russo determination, Dominic murmured, wrapping his arms around his wife as they stood watching their children. They moved quietly to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan's glittering skyline. The penthouse that had once felt hollow now pulsed with life and purpose, evidence of their presence in every corner, from the baby swing in the living room to the children's books stacked on once pristine coffee tables. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have gone?" Lyra asked, curling against him on the sofa. "If I hadn't applied to be your surrogate? If you hadn't chosen me?" "Every day," Dominic admitted. "I had it all planned so perfectly. A clinical arrangement. Children without complications. Heirs without emotional entanglements." Lyra smiled against his shoulder. The universe had other ideas. Thank God for that. His fingers threaded through her honey-gold hair, still marveling at how someone he'd once seen as merely a means to an end had become the center of his world. "I was so determined to protect myself from being hurt again that I nearly missed the greatest happiness of my life." "We both had walls," Lyra reminded him. "Mine were just quieter than yours." This was the lesson that had transformed them both, that safety doesn't come from isolation or control, but from the courage to remain open despite past wounds. Dominic, betrayed by his wife and closest friend, had responded by attempting to create a family that couldn't hurt him. Lyra, abandoned by her mother and burdened with responsibility too young, had protected herself by avoiding attachment altogether. Yet when crisis came, when blood stained Lyra's pajamas and 4 tiny heartbeats hung in the balance, those carefully constructed defenses crumbled, revealing the truth both had been hiding from. That love is always a risk and always worth taking. "I thought having children would be about legacy," Dominic reflected, "about extending myself into the future. I never realized they would teach me how to live in the present." "And what have they taught you?" Lyra asked, looking up at him. "That control is an illusion. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That trust, once broken, can be rebuilt stronger than before." His voice softened. "That the heart expands in ways we can't imagine until we're forced to love more than we thought possible." As they sat together in the quiet evening, both reflected on how their carefully structured contract had evolved into something no legal document could ever capture, a partnership forged through crisis, strengthened by choice, and sustained by a love neither had been looking for. 1 year after the quadruplets' birth, the Russo family gathered on the expansive lawn of their new weekend home in the Hamptons. The property, 10 acres of rolling grounds with a main house and guest cottage, had been Dominic's gift to Lyra on their first anniversary. "Room to grow," he'd said simply when he presented her with the keys. Today, blankets spread beneath ancient oak trees created the perfect setting for the quadruplets' first birthday celebration. Alexander and Benjamin, already walking with determination, toddled between guests while Sophia and Grace practiced standing, holding on to furniture with triumphant grins that showcased their matching dimples. Thomas Bennett, his health stabilized by the experimental treatments Dominic had arranged, sat in a comfortable chair observing the scene with evident joy. Beside him, Elizabeth Russo entertained her granddaughters with stories, her once intimidating demeanor softened by the tiny hands that reached for her pearls. Raphael, now engaged to Lyra's friend Mia after meeting at the wedding, manned the grill with surprising domestic competence. The brothers' relationship had healed over the past year, strengthened by Raphael's devotion as an uncle and Dominic's growing ability to express appreciation rather than criticism. Dominic found Lyra arranging cupcakes on a table decorated with photos documenting the baby's first year for newborns in their incubators, their first bath, Christmas with matching stockings, the family portrait taken just last week. All 6 Russos laughing in the spring sunshine. "Happy?" he asked, sliding his arms around her waist. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she answered, leaning back against him. "When I signed that surrogacy contract, I thought I was making a sacrifice for my future. I never dreamed I was actually finding it." As they watched their children, miracles born of science but nurtured by love, Dominic reflected on how completely his definition of success had transformed. The man who once measured achievement in acquisitions and profit margins now found his greatest accomplishment in the simple sound of his children's laughter. The moral of Dominic and Lyra's story isn't that love conquers all or that happy endings are guaranteed. It's that our deepest wounds often create the opportunity for our greatest healing, if we're brave enough to remain open despite the risk of pain. Dominic's betrayal could have sealed him permanently behind walls of distrust. Lyra's years of sacrifice could have convinced her that her own happiness would always come second. Instead, they found in each other the courage to try again, to believe that authenticity might be rewarded rather than exploited, that vulnerability could lead to strength rather than destruction. Their journey reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with broken plans, that contracts can't contain the human heart, that family isn't always formed in traditional ways. And most importantly, that second chances aren't just about forgiveness, but about the courage to risk being hurt again because the possibility of love is worth it. Has this story touched your heart? If you've ever had to rebuild trust after betrayal or found love in the most unexpected circumstances, this message is for you. Like this video if you believe in second chances and the healing power of authentic connection. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that their broken path could be leading them to unexpected blessings. Subscribe for more stories that remind us how life's greatest challenges often become the gateway to our deepest joy. Comment below, what unexpected turn in your life led to your greatest blessing?